The voice of Husker Nation is on the air. This is Hail Varsity Radio. Insight, opinion, expertise, along with the biggest names talking Nebraska sports. Join in with the show at 402-489-1240 or 1-800-825-5865. Now, here are your hosts, Chris Schmidt and Elijah Herbel.
Great to have you in. Midweek edition. It's Hail Varsity. Chris Schmidt, Elijah Herbel, Justice Rhody is in. And a lot to get to as we try and dive a little further into Nebraska-Indiana. We'll play famous Hoosiers. And if you're having an all-time state of Indiana famous people draft, who are you taking? We've got quite a list. On the program today, we'll check in with Mr. Husker Football, Mike Babcock, with Hail Varsity and Hurrdat Sports. Babbers will check in with us in the stream. Can always watch the show, Hail Varsity YouTube. Like and subscribe there. Hail Varsity Radio Twitter, at HVarsity Radio. Give that a follow as well. Different platforms as well on Facebook and Twitter outlets, and can hear us across the Hail Varsity Radio Network. Folks are already getting in on Jeff Sims getting the nod at Arizona State. My God. Poor dude.
I think good for Jeff. I know I'm in the minority there.
Levitt's hurt with a busted rib, and here comes old Sims. He got a game-winning touchdown just a couple weeks ago. But, man, Grateful Red already is with the Hoosier Daddy take. Love it. So, yeah, we'll have a little fun here with some famous Indianans.
Yeah, I get, I guess, some of the discourse surrounding Jeff Sims. I get it. You had high hopes for him. He came in and made a lot of money at Nebraska. Didn't quite live up to it. But at the end of the day, it's a college kid. Like, don't you want him to go out there and succeed and have a good start underneath his belt? Maybe I'm in the minority there, but I root for guys like that. Like, things didn't work out here at Nebraska. That sucks for him. That sucks for Nebraska.
Dude got paid.
But can we all move on and say good luck to you down at Arizona
State?
Sims.
You got Raiola here. So
yeah, that's what I'm saying. Like, it's one thing if there's no quarterback here and like a good quarterback transferred away. Like, say your favorite quarterback at Nebraska transferred away right before his senior year and is balling out somewhere else. I would understand a little bit of vitriol that way. But this is a guy that was just looking for an opportunity and goes off to Arizona State. Now he gets an opportunity, and you're going to still have hard feelings about last year? That's just me.
We'll get to the phones here in a second. 489-1240 to get in. Chris at hailvarsity.com. Find us on Twitter at Schmidt_radio, at Herbal Essence, and at Justice Rhody on Twitter. Can follow Justice as well. In hour two, Evan Bland gets us kicked off. Former Hoosier coach and part of the Big Ten Network, Gerry DiNardo. Uncle Jerry going to join us at 5:25, and then a Jock Doc before we are done. Who's on the horn?
We have NU Grandpa calling in all the way from Chattanooga.
All the way from Tennessee. Oh, Rocky Top.
Oh!
And he's disconnected.
Oh, try us again, NU Grandpa.
So he was trying to do the old 40-40 club here, going stream and on the phone. 800-825-5865. We'll see what gremlins emerge technically today, but we'll get into our starting five. So here's the list of famous Hoosiers. Larry Joe Bird, of course, an amazing basketball player for the Celtics. Love me some Larry Bird. Michael Jackson and Janet Jackson, both born in the state of Indiana. James Dean, the great John Wooden. I interviewed John Wooden back in 2003. I have that on CD somewhere, but there's no CD player. Mrs. Brady, Florence Henderson. Axl Rose of Guns N' Roses. David Lee Roth, Diamond Dave from Van Halen fame. John Cougar Mellencamp. Dean Norris, Hank from Breaking Bad, Adam Driver, Don Mattingly, Donnie Baseball, Orville Redenbacher, and how about Colonel Sanders? I always thought Colonel Sanders was a Kentucky guy because of Kentucky Fried Chicken. Free shout-out Wednesday, apparently. In the same sense, he was born in Indiana. And the suit, Rob down the hall. We're going to include him in the famous Indianans. So who are you drafting as famous Indiana lore? NU Grandpa was in first in the stream. He says, I plan to call today with an interesting, not incredible observation. Stay tuned. We'll see if we get him patched through. Grateful Red also in. Justin Olboot is in third, part of the starting five. Justin here. So Tiger Shark makes it in. Mr. Snitley is here as Jeff Snitley, part of the Boulder Peace Treaty. And just listened to a betting podcast, says Mr. Snitley. The hosts were high on IU, said their left tackle is legit, and they like Cignetti's ability to make in-game adjustments versus rules in-game adjustments. You know what? The game within the game will be something that you're interesting in wondering about if you're Nebraska in a tight ball game. I'm interested to see what adjustments, if any, the offense can and will make to put 4 quarters of offensive football, not offensive football together for Nebraska.
Oh, the phone lines are being...
The phone's kicking Justice's ass right now.
And I've been there too. There's 2 banks to take you inside Hollywood
right now,
here. There's 2 phone banks, and you got to answer on the bottom and then flip it to the top. We had this problem a couple weeks ago where whenever you try to flip it from bottom to top, it is just causing a world of hurt.
And you, Grandpa, just type in your interesting observation on the stream.
Well, did he pass it along to you, Justice?
He did pass it along to me. I'm sure you want to hear it. He said that our road games, 4 out of our 5 road games, are the opponent's homecoming games.
Yep.
So, major sign of disrespect is what NU Grandpa wanted to pass along.
Well, start winning in the Big Ten. Start winning in the Big Ten.
We could with phone calls here start going unscreened and just putting them straight on the air. It would eliminate some of our issues, but it also create some new ones.
Yeah, praying that the delay is working.
I was watching a whole compilation of C-SPAN's prank callers yesterday, and that gave me fear for a moment like this.
If it goes horribly wrong in Bloomington, Real Red Reaction. Elijah will look like he's gripping a desk. The other Dave is in, also weighing in from the podcast world. Pro Football Focus says Indiana has only run man defense 20 plays this year. Dillon's one of the top quarterbacks in the country against zone. Yeah, so 90% completion, I believe, I saw on social media.
And I've been preaching this from the rooftops. I'm glad people are finally starting to pay attention to what I say with Dylan Raiola and this Husker offense in general against man coverage. Not necessarily built for it. That's not all on Dylan, I don't think. Receivers have continuously struggled to get separation against man, but it's good to see the world kind of catching up. And that sounds so egotistical, but Schmidt, I've been on this for weeks now, and I've kind of been looking at that. That's why I was worried about Illinois with as much as they were willing to play man coverage. That's kind of as far back as this conversation goes. Indiana playing a lot of zone bodes well for Nebraska. I agree with everybody says there. I've been on this topic for weeks now.
I'm more interested if somebody goes man against Nebraska to get open. I'm interested to get open and win your one-on-ones.
That's what I'm saying.
It's
not
Nebraska
not all on Dylan.
Wide receiver. And I'm also interested is much depth and talent as we think Nebraska has at tight end. Let's start wearing some teams out if you're a Nebraska fan with Fedoni, with Borkacher, with Harburg, with Liebentritt. I mean, you can get some yak yards yourself on a 4-yard pass completion that turns into 11 or better. So I think Indiana's going to go to town, or try to, with the tight end on Saturday. And that's Nebraska's got some hybrid defenders. Anxious to hear Mike Babcock's thoughts on Nebraska-Indiana. 3-putt is in. And Black Hills Brennan finding his way into the stream as well. Coach Brandon's here. Cliff says, go big effing red. Cliff from Florida. Ronnie is here. We have Wahoo, J. Bismay Dad. There we go. Jim is here. Mr. Farley, good to have you. Captain is back in. Mudflaps is here. Jeff is present. Ace is voting Larry. Ace says Larry Bird's his top pick of famous Hoosiers. Jordan checks in. I know that old DJ Clay is going to be on site in Bloomington. We ran into DJ Clay, Mr. Collier, at the big 10 media session. That was a good time. Gregory is here. Tim checks in from Idaho. So good to have everybody in. 489-1240. Izzy Stradlin, part of Guns N' Roses. I think Izzy got kicked out of Guns N' Roses for drug use, which is hard to believe or do in that rock band in the 1980s. But Izzy was also from the great state of Indiana. Got to go Wooden first. And then I'm probably going Larry Bird second. Third, it's tough for me. Between Donnie Baseball or Axl or Diamond Dave. I'm a big Diamond David Lee Roth fan. Love that version of Van Halen. Antoine Randall L., not Said I the Fly, checks in. So Antoine Randall L. is probably Indiana's greatest player in the last 20-plus years, although Rourke may say something about it. Fellas, thing on my mind
Well, before we get away from that, I do want to give a shout-out. My grandpa, big Red Skelton fan. Skelton from Indiana, a little bit before my time, but I'm sure some other people out there would resound with that.
How many bags of microwave Orville Redenbacher did you burn as a kid in the microwave? Just totally torched the house, smelled it up.
Is Orville Redenbacher from Indiana?
I said that.
Oh, I missed that. I'm sorry. You're going through the whole list of names.
Passed away in 95.
I didn't know he was actually an actual person.
Yeah, Orville Redenbacher, the popcorn genius / kingpin.
I thought it was just like kind of one of those names that they just named, like kind of like Aunt Jemima, you know?
No, Orville was a real person, not a bottle that Ron Burgundy did horrible things with.
How about that? You learn something new every day.
Yeah, apparently. Loose Lips is in. So Tiger Shark wants to see tight end play as well. But the topic of relevancy, let's dive into that for a moment. And as a Nebraska fan, you have wanted a lot of things. You've wanted rankings. You've wanted big game opportunity, big game wins, and you've wanted November to matter. All those things are still in play. You're currently ranked in one poll. You have a chance to knock off a team that's been a bit of a surprise and national darling and ruin their homecoming, one to remember. And you have a chance to take a step forward on offense and as a football team. And I'm not putting it all on the offense, but of the three phases, your defense has been over here, safe and kind of on an island. Your offense is somewhere in the middle where they've had their moments. They've done enough. It's been better, but far from reliable. And then there's special teams where you're just praying it doesn't cost you a football game. And you've overcome a couple of instances. You think of Purdue and you think of Rutgers, where one road game, one home game against a black and blue squad in Rutgers, that you survive both of those games. You distance yourself because your offense gets some rhythm in the second half against Purdue. You hang on because your defense played great football for you, and you did enough offensively in the first half. In-game adjustments, and we'll get into that with Coach DiNardo here in hour two. But, what do you draw up? What's working? What's plan B? What's contingency off of that for 4 quarters, Elijah? Justice, what do you go in with? Okay, if they're going to play zone, get that carving knife out if you're Dylan Raiola with your receiving core, but also get the run game going downhill. And we'll see if this is the week against a smaller front where Nebraska, physicality-wise, can really just start hammering away and control it that way. I might be wrong here Saturday, but my early feel this week as we're midway through the week is this is a game where the defense will have their moments, but if the offense doesn't help with the lifting, this is a situation where it could be dangerous for the Nebraska defense. And what I mean by that is they're just on the field or they're having to go win it. And I don't like that against this offense for any defense, quite frankly, unless they get some help on the offensive side. And so can the offense do their thing and have an answer once Indiana stops what had been working for the Nebraska offense, assuming that they get off to a good start with the football, running it, throwing it, all that.
And one of the things we talked about preseason, with this Indiana defense is the transfers they brought in along their front seven from James Madison are guys that at James Madison were in the backfield plenty. Like some of the, I think it was the top team or at least top 5 in tackles for loss last year were James Madison with that front seven. That's how they want to play defense. They might not physically overpower you, but they get that one negative play. You're behind the sticks. They fly around. Again, they get you behind the sticks, and then they're able to take advantage that way. To me, offensively, like which running back do you want to turn to? Because this feels to me like a Dowdell game where you want a guy that is going to hit the hole hard, is going to fall forward, is going to avoid dancing around in the backfield and taking a loss of 3 or 4 yards and screwing up your offensive game plan. You want a guy that when there's nothing there can put his head down and go get himself 2 because they're going to be handoffs where there's nothing there. And that's the guy to me that feels like will do that the best is Dowdell. It feels to me like, kind of like the Colorado game. I think Indiana's more complete than that Colorado football team, but similar where offensive firepower is the name of their game. Defensively, they just want to do enough to give their offense a chance. They really want to get the ball to their playmakers on the outside. That was Colorado, and who played really well against Colorado? Dowdell. I kind of circle him as a guy that could be featured plenty on Saturdays. You know what? Just keep this offense in rhythm, keep him moving forward, and make Dylan Raiola's life a little bit easier.
You know, how much better is Dowdell going to be at making guys miss? I know his game is running you over, but there's chances to make a guy miss. Vic, sadly, Junior's team has been eliminated from the playoffs. Mike Babcock's on the way.
And now, back to Hail Varsity Radio.
Back with you, it's Hail Varsity, 489-1240. Can like and subscribe and do the Facebook thing as well. Hail Varsity YouTube, or you can watch the show. Podcast is Spotify, iTunes, Google Play for Hail Varsity Radio. Mike Babcock with us from Hail Varsity and Hurrdat Sports. Get his bi-weekly newsletter, getting you all things Big Red football. Mike B at hurrdatsports.com is where you can email that in. Babber's big one. Did you have this thing circled before the year started as potential for Big Noon?
No, I did not. I had, but like I say every week, it's the next one up. Next game is the most important, and I think we'll learn more about Nebraska as we watch this game and see how it comes out.
Well, Mike, as you reach a Wednesday, what's your concern level with this Indiana team? Because as you talk to Husker Nation coming off the bye, I don't think the confidence level is super high in this team. People like what they've seen. They think they're better. They don't think they're great. You look at Indiana, a team that's 6-0, a high-powered offense that seems scary on its face, but then you dive into some of the games they played and you go, well, maybe they're a bit of a paper tiger. I don't know. What's your concern level with the Hoosiers?
You know, that's the one thing, Elijah, that you have to take their schedule into consideration a little bit. You know, they scored 77 points against Western Illinois. They scored 52 against Charlotte. The Big Ten schedule that they've played so far has not been all that imposing. But on the other side, you've got a team that ranks in the top 10 nationally in total defense and ranks in the top 10 in total offense. Both these teams rank in the top 10 nationally in rushing defense, and I think that's where you have to start. I think you have to establish some sort of a running game against a defense that's going to be really strong against the run. So I think your observation about Dowdell is spot on there. I think he's going to have to do some things that take some of the pressure off of Raiola. And I think Nebraska's capable of winning this game. But to me, it's a toss-up. You got to see, has Nebraska improved on special teams, taking that step, because it sounds like Indiana is, at least the coach, Cignetti, had that reputation, according to rule, at James Madison of blocking punts, and Nebraska's had 5 blocked this year. So that's another factor to consider, I guess.
There's a lot of ways this thing can go, and Nebraska's been on the wrong side of it in these moments over an extended period of time against ranked teams with the national stage. And it's time eventually, if you're a Nebraska fan, for that to stop. Go play a good football game. And if you're beat because the other team is better, so be it, but don't help out. And if Nebraska falls Saturday in a tight ball game because of a special team screw up, this place will lose its mind, Mike. I mean, I 2 weeks, bye week, but the last 2 ball games you've played bad enough on special teams, aside from Buscemi's punting, to get you beat, typically, when you look at statistics, when it comes to blocked field goals or punts. They've both happened, and it sounds like there's been a lot of emphasis and hands-on activity by the staff to shore up special teams. So that better be better. I can't imagine it staying the same or getting worse. I mean, it has to improve, doesn't it? They've got the talent to be better on that phase.
Well, you'd think so, and you're right. It has to get better. You can't go the other way. I don't know how it could be a whole lot worse, to be honest with you. But, yeah, you've got to get better in that area. I mean, we've said that before. We say it. It doesn't get better. Things happen. And, you're right. Buscemi does it well enough that he gets a black shirt. He earns the respect of the defense. But you got to go beyond that. You've got to do it's not just the one guy. It's 11 on special teams, and that's that can be the pivotal point if you don't do a good job of that. But I think that Nebraska has shown at times that it has the ability to get the job done. You just need the consistency. And we haven't always seen that consistency that's necessary to.
Well, from a consistency standpoint, where do you think the offense is now going to be after the break?
That rule brought up the concept of explosive runs. You're getting the job done. As far as the running game goes on picking up 4 yards here or whatever, that kind of consistency, but you're not getting the explosive runs. That's the thing that you want to do. And I don't know if against a team like Indiana, if you do that, if you get an explosive run or two, that could make a big difference against a team like Indiana. So to me, that's probably the area that is going to make that running game better is the explosiveness. And you've got guys, I think, with potential to do that, but we just haven't seen a lot of it to this point. And that's really important. And again, these things are going to open up the opportunity, I think, for Dylan Raiola, because ultimately he's probably going to be the guy that determines whether you're successful or not. If he gets an opportunity to throw the ball, and that I think is the Nebraska strength. But the running game has to be there, and it's against a defense that has shown that it can do well against a run.
Mike, as we talk about the running game here, what's your take through 6 games now coming out of the bye on the running back bye rotation as a whole? Successful or no in your eyes?
I still think that it would be. I understand why they rotate guys in there the way they do. You would like to have somebody, and again, it could be Dowdell in this case, where you're getting 20, 22, 23, 24 carries a game, and you've got that potential for the explosiveness, but you've got the consistency from one of those guys, and then you use in situational offense, you use Emmett Johnson and you use Ramir. Ramir can do a lot of different things for you. So you want him on the field when you can. But I think you have to focus on one guy to have the consistency that you need to have in the running game.
Mike, I wanted to ask you this real quick. You put out an article in Hail Varsity Digest detailing the game in 1976 against Indiana. That was back when the pipeline was really being established. So I wanted to ask you, going into this game against Indiana, it's a road game, conditions are going to be nice. How important is the pipeline, the trenches as a whole, going to be to sway the outcome in Nebraska's favor in this ball game?
That's a good question, Justice, and I think it's really important that the guys on the offensive line step up. in a lot of ways, in the running game and also in the protection of Raiola. And again, we seem to believe that there's the potential to do that. Let's see it happen. And, now you've got Gunnar Gatula has got some experience on that left side. They've got some variations that they use in situations where Mazuka got in there. Mm-hmm. And I think that you have the potential, but we've got to see it. It's got to be there, because if you don't have that, you're in trouble, I think, against Indiana.
You want a mentality, and I know Mazuka's a backup and a guy that's not really done much since the second half of the Colorado game. Lutoski's come in and performed well. But Babbers, when they've gone jumbo with a fullback, good luck stopping Nebraska downhill. I mean, to me, it seems like that's your formation to go inflict some pain against Indiana. If Nebraska wants to be physical and dominate, take the crowd out, control the time of possession, all those things, and just body blow away, let's see a little jumbo travel to Indiana.
Well, I think that kind of gets back, not to cut you off, Mike, but the want versus need from the offensive play calling is Nebraska's offense wants to be explosive. I don't know if they think they can be explosive with that jumbo set, but they consistently pick up 4 to 5. And it might not be what you want to do, but it's been successful so far this year. So it's kind of the two sides to that.
I think you pound away with the jumbo and you go like what was once the thing. By the fourth quarter, you pound them enough to wear them down to where you can be successful. And, this is one of the things I think I was surprised at how badly Rutgers was beaten last weekend. Yeah. I look at that and I think some of that was, I think Nebraska physically pounded on Rutgers. I think Rutgers was physically feeling the effects of the Nebraska game. Nebraska had the advantage of a week off. Rutgers didn't have the advantage of a week off. And I think that played into it because I think Nebraska can be physical. And I think that's what you have to start to be so that you can, by the fourth quarter, you're the much more physical team and you wear them down.
Mike, famous Hoosiers for 1,000. You've got a bunch of folks that were born in the state of Indiana. John Wooden, Larry Bird, David Lee Roth. I know you've got a collection of Diamond Dave T-shirts to go with your Grateful Dead collection, kind of joking. Don Mattingly, Orville Redenbacher. What famous Hoosier are you drafting from the state?
Well, I liked your observation earlier about John Wooden, certainly. Mm-hmm. And I'm old enough to remember Red Skelton. He was a pretty funny guy.
Okay.
So I might put him in my top 3, but I think Wooden is going to be at the top. And I think Larry Bird's got to be in there somewhere.
So Wooden, no Michael Jackson?
It's hard to leave him out.
But he is from Gary, so.
That's close to Chicago, right?
Yes, it is.
It's close to an armpit, too.
Elijah's going to get dropped off in Gary and crawl out of there. Axl Rose, I don't know, man. A lot of famous Hoosiers.
I like David Lee Roth, too. It's a tough call. I got a bunch of them in there,
I'm glad
get the jumbo list.
I'm glad someone backed up my Red Skelton call, though.
Sure.
I know it's not a popular name in 2024, but he is a legend.
No. You got to go back. He was a funny guy.
Mike Babcock with us from Hail Varsity, Hurrdat Sports. Follow Mike on Twitter at MDBabs, Mike B at HurrdatSports.com for that bi-weekly newsletter. Babbers, excited for it? Tiger Shark says Gary is close to another location. Mike, we'll check in later on. Appreciate your time, bud.
Thanks for having me, guys.
And now, back to Hail Varsity Radio.
Back with you, it's Hail Varsity. Chris Schmidt, Elijah Herbel, Justice Rhody. You can find us on YouTube. Like and subscribe there. Watch Hail Varsity YouTube channel. Hail Varsity Radio Twitter. So Coach Signetti making the rounds nationally with McAfee today. And the travel itinerary of one Indiana football. The one team to deal with the old time zone difference this year in the Big Ten as they went out to UCLA and rolled. Late arriving, it sounds like. Thing about Cignetti that I didn't know till a little bit earlier today is he was, when Saban got to Bama, Cignetti was Saban's recruiting coordinator.
So he must have been involved. We've talked about it plenty with Lars Anderson, that Julio Jones recruitment.
Yes.
Ooh, okay.
Well, I'm sure it was Saban making a phone call or several, and Cignetti said, yeah, you got to go get Julio. But, I mean, he was the number one player, 5-star in the country. But that was your difference maker, right? You've seen a slew of different difference makers get to Bama, be it the running back position. They went from pro-style quarterback to dual threat guy, and they've had a slew of first-round picks. And then, of course, the wide receivers. I mean, you've had a first-rounder wideout from Bama for forever and a day. And Cignetti was part of that staff before he went back to being the head coach at some of the lower levels. So we'll get to some more comments here and get your thoughts here on the stream and email. We talk about return to relevancy for Nebraska, not only this Saturday, but next with that stage, and what type of showing do you put forth if you're Nebraska as a complete football team as an underdog? You can go in the next 2 weeks as an underdog. First things first, though, go play good football against Indiana. And I am not talking about the narrative or the consideration with Nebraska in the college football playoff, and I'm not eliminating them because they lost to Illinois. But right now, you've got Penn State and Oregon are your two playoff teams with Ohio State right in there. You've got a log jam and another elimination game with who's still in contention, right, for your top 4 spots in the Big Ten. And right now, Indiana's right there. You've got Illinois and Michigan that sound off against one another this weekend in Champaign. That's an elimination game because it'd be a second conference loss. And then right now, Washington and SC are right there. Minnesota.
You haven't said Iowa yet.
I've got them on the list as well. Iowa is right there. They have one conference loss. They looked pretty wowish against Washington, but I don't know that it's an easy game for them, to be honest. I mean, they were staring going into Washington. They lose that. They're 3-3. Mm-hmm. All right. So Iowa's absolutely in contention right now. But Wisconsin, Minnesota, kind of right there. What USC team do you get week to week? What Nebraska team do you get week to week? Same with the Huskies. So, your safe plays right now, Oregon, Penn State, Ohio State, clearly. But there's so much jockeying right now, fellas, for that 4th spot. Nebraska could find their way in there. Iowa could absolutely find their way in there. Indiana's got to keep doing their thing. And then, Michigan, Illinois. Illinois still, right now, arguably has one of the best wins in league play, aside from what Oregon's got, and US and Penn State. But Illinois' win on the road in overtime against Nebraska looks pretty good.
Well, and I don't want to be too early here because we talk about elimination games. I think there's 2 this weekend. I kind of hit on Monday where I think Indiana and Nebraska is an elimination game. I would agree. It's the same with Michigan and Illinois. Mm-hmm. That's an elimination game for being that 4th team. As you look at Iowa, who I think probably has the best chance as it stands right now of being that 4th team, I mean, they close out the season at Michigan State. Then they have Northwestern, Wisconsin, UCLA, Maryland, and Nebraska. Realistically, Iowa should win all of its games before Black Friday. Mm-hmm. Now,
Wisconsin's weird, though, because they've said, all right, we're not going to do this damn air raid. We don't have a quarterback to do it, so we got big people on the line, and let's hand off for 300 yards. They go back to that. Wisconsin's a different squad.
Yeah, but as you look at Wisconsin's football schedule, what they have coming up, not a whole lot of fun. I mean, you got Northwestern, should be a win, but then you turn around and you have number 3 Penn State, and then Iowa, and then Oregon, and then Nebraska. That's Wisconsin's football schedule.
That is brutal.
I mean, I'm just going to look at the schedule on its face and say Wisconsin already with those 2 losses is not going to be that 4th team in the Big Ten because I don't think there's any way they can win out with that schedule. No, but I think they could spoil. I mean, I think they could end up 6-6, 7-5. I'm not saying they beat Oregon, but Penn State, I mean, here's what you got, too.
Ohio State's got a bye week, but before they head to Penn State, it's weird because Ohio State's look ahead is Penn State. Penn State's look ahead is Ohio State. Meanwhile, you got to deal with Wisconsin and Nebraska. If you're not taking them seriously, that could be a 4-quarter snot knocker for you.
And without looking too far ahead here, I want to dive back in with Nebraska and Indiana. Why it's an elimination game in my eyes? It's simply because both teams have a path to being that fourth team in the Big Ten, and it starts with winning this weekend. I don't think whoever loses this football game has a path to being number 4. Indiana potentially, considering they're already undefeated, but if they can't get past Nebraska, I would doubt that they can get past Michigan, let alone Ohio State. It's a week-to-week conference. Yes, I understand that. You never know what it looks like, but that would be an emotional hit, I think, for the Indiana football team to go and lose a football game with the meat of your schedule still upcoming, especially to lose at homecoming, big noon kickoff, the biggest game you've played so far this season. That'd be an emotional hit to them. You turn around, you look at Nebraska with what they have coming up. If you lose to Indiana, you're already at 2 conference losses, which puts you behind the 8 ball. And then you got Ohio State the next week. And I'm of the opinion if Nebraska can't beat Indiana, they're going to struggle to hang with Ohio State, let alone beat them. So both these teams, if you lose, the path to being that 4th team in the Big Ten feels damn near impossible. Mm-hmm. If you win it, it's still uphill, but I think you could get away with one more loss and still be in contention for that 4th spot in the Big Ten. Nebraska would have to go beat Iowa on Black Friday. Indiana would probably have to get Michigan. Those are the 2 big games you'd have to have in order to have a chance. And I've set USC to the side for Nebraska because I still don't know what USC actually is. But all that being considered, if you win on Saturday, yeah, you have a path to being the 4th team in the Big Ten where you at least give yourself a chance at a college football playoff, and that's a long ways away, but that's what this is. If you lose, I just don't see a path.
What I'm interested in is what do you do the rest of this month with your 2 monster challenges, mid-teen ranked Indiana, that's winnable for you, also very losable. How do you take that momentum or that negative situation and bounce back in Columbus a week later? Are you're riding high and you've got some juice because you won on the road and you go into Columbus confident again as an underdog? Or are you licking wounds because you got beat, you got worked, you stepped on yourself, whatever the case, however Saturday shakes out? How do you go into Columbus? And then, what's your setup look like in November? Are you really playing your best football by the end of the year like Coach Rule talked about? And I think, listen, I think they absolutely can get better as the year goes on. And that starts Saturday. That absolutely starts Saturday off of a bye week. Defense has been flat out incredible for most of the season. Waiting for the offense and special teams to play some catch-up ball. And can they travel and be a part of a win, a pretty monumental win? We'll wind down hour 1 with Hail Varsity.
And now, back to Hail Varsity Radio.
One final time this hour, Hail Varsity, as can find us on YouTube, Hail Varsity YouTube, Hail Varsity Radio, Twitter, and give us a recommendation, pass us along to a friend, and check out the podcast, Spotify, iTunes, Google Play, those 3 platforms. Reminder to get buckled up. Driving is a full-time job. Phones, food, and friends need your attention. When you're not driving, stop the distractions, just drive. This message from the NDOT Highway Safety Office. Arlo shouting out justice, dropping some facts. Kid does his homework. There we go. We got to get some homework done as far as what shots to bring justice, because you got the birthday tomorrow. Well, look big old 2-1.
Did you see the research Justice did on the Signetti, who we recruited in that class?
Mark Ingram stole Sue's Heisman. Dante Hightower, a 6'4", 275-pound linebacker that thrived for New England. 6 first-round picks.
That was the 2011 NFL draft?
I think so, because Saban got there in, 07? 07 and played Colorado, I think in some sort of casino bowl.
Yeah, the 6 first-round. Marcel Darius, Julio Jones.
Julio.
James Carpenter, that name doesn't ring a bell, offensive tackle. Mark Ingram, yeah. You have, who else am I missing?
So I believe the 08 squad, because Saban went 7-6 his first season there. In 07, they went 10-2, lost to Tebow in the SEC title game, and then Utah smoked them in the Sugar Bowl. But then never again. The year 3, they go win the title, and they smoke Texas. And howdy doody at Colt McCoy at quarterback. Red Wine is here. Good to have you in the stream. Loose Lips says it is Jaeger. Easy choice for Justice.
Oof.
Yeah, Jaeger's a big-time ick. Spring break, never again.
If it's like,
even if it's chilled.
I was gonna say, if it's in the freezer, I mean,
No. No.
I'm only human.
The Rumpelmitz, old Mr. Viteska is the king of Rumpelmitz when we're doing road shows in town.
Gotta love Scott.
Yes, Scotty's incredible. But yeah, Rumpelmitz and Jaeger, I don't know.
Malort.
Justice, is a kid, all grown up. Moonbot giving you a shout out there, Justice. Do you have that murderer's row planned out? Are your buddies from the broadcast college already set to do damage to you tomorrow?
No, because I'm working a late shift at the rec. It's 11:30 to or 8:30 to 11:15.
Is that on purpose?
No, it was a late switch. Was going to take the early shift.
On your birthday, you're working.
Yeah, got to make money somehow.
That's a great time. You're off at 11:15. The night is still young.
Yeah, but then I gotta sleep because got to get up and get some homework done before I head back. So,
man, we were
here for business, not pleasure.
Better student than we were.
And don't ask Dolman about my several freshman years. Find us Friday. We're on the road. We're at the casino. We can take Justice with us now that he'll be 21. We invite you across the river, Ameristar, Council Bluffs Casinos, where we're going to be on Friday, 4 to 6 road show, as we're at Amerisports Book. So 4 to 6 in Council Bluffs Friday. Come find our Hail Varsity Road Show.
The voice of Husker Nation is on the air. This is Hail Varsity Radio. Insight, opinion, expertise, along with the biggest names talking Nebraska sports. Join in with the show at 402-489-1240 or 1-800-825-5865. Now, here are your hosts, Chris Schmidt and Elijah Herbel.
Back into it. It's hour 2. It's Hail Varsity. Always find us on the podcast page, Spotify, iTunes, Google Play with Hail Varsity Radio. Like and subscribe to the Hail Varsity YouTube channel. You can watch the show that way. And, of course, Hail Varsity Radio. Twitter at HVarsity Radio. Chris Schmidt, Elijah Herbel, Justice Rhody, as we welcome in Evan Bland, Omaha World Herald. He's been checking out some Husker baseball. He's locked in for Big Red football. Elijah, he's trying to fight the good fight when it comes to the backyard and all those trees, right? The trees, the leaves. 'Tis the season to let the wind blow those leaves into your neighbor's yard. Evan, how does that fight rage? Good, bad, or ugly with the leaves?
You know, it piles a little bit. I've got trees in my backyard that are always late fallers. So, like, right about, a week ago or so, I'm kind of ready to do it, but the leaves don't all come down for me until, like, after Halloween. So everyone else's trees are, for whatever reason, done, and mine aren't, and so I've got the leafy lawn into November. So, trying to get in that last mow to maybe suck up some of those leaves, but the job's really not done for me until November, unfortunately.
I had a neighbor lady, and I mowed her yard for years, and she had 1,000 trees in the backyard, and the grass wouldn't grow, but she hated leaves, and it was pretty much a vacuum mission for me. So time served, man. Just let the wind blow them to the neighbor's yard.
I was thinking this. That's why I'm going to wait for Nebraska's second bye week in hopes that most of it ends up in the neighbor's yard, and then whatever I have to deal with, I have to deal with.
It was just busy with work. Sorry.
you can get away with it with the leaves. When you're picking up sticks or whatever, I don't know if you guys ever kind of like glance around and maybe toss one over the fence every now and again. I can tell I've never done that. But the leaves, you can let Mother Nature do her job on that one.
I like it. Well, how are we feeling here? As you look at the line, you look at the projections here, the kind of the tone going in, Evan. Nebraska is, I don't want to say playing up the underdog, but they've been on some big stages this season. They're 1-1. We look at Colorado, we look at Illinois, and look at this Indiana matchup. I mean, it's pretty exciting. A topic we've touched on going into this second hour is restoring relevancy. Nebraska's front and center. It's not, Texas, Georgia, but they're pretty much front and center as one of the key games in the league this week.
It is. I mean, you look even nationally, some of the places that are projecting CFP qualifiers, they're giving Indiana a 40% chance of making that field, and this is a huge game for that. I think that's one of the things that's interesting to me, guys, is like it's clear what the stakes are for Nebraska in terms of, hey, you can end the bowl drought and you can beat a top 25 team. This is a huge game for Indiana, too. You look at their second half schedule, it's extremely manageable outside of that two-step with Ohio State and Michigan. Like it's a schedule that could produce a 10-2 kind of team. So it's a really interesting game from Indiana's perspective. You kind of look at the challenges that Nebraska faces that are unique. You mentioned one being the underdog, and this is the first time that's been the case this season. That's been the first time the Huskers have been the underdog with Dylan Raiola as the quarterback. So what does that look like? Dylan said on Tuesday he embraced the role, and the great ones tend to do that. So how does that look? What happens if Nebraska, say, gets down by a couple scores? Like, do they open up the offense a little bit? That's something else that we haven't really seen from Nebraska. They played a lot of close games, but if they need to make up some ground, say, against Indiana, what does that look like? I think the other thing that's fascinating is it's the first truly raucous road environment that they're going into. And Purdue had a few, steam engine whistles and some of the students got creative telling Dylan that he wasn't Patrick Mahomes, but like this is the first real, I think, kind of hornet's nest that they're going into. And not just saying that Indiana's one of the top venues in the Big Ten or anything, but that's going to be a full crowd. They've already announced the sellout, big noon kickoffs there and all the rest. So like I think that part plays into it too. And I think it's important for Nebraska to start early. Indiana has a team of guys that have transferred from elsewhere that maybe that's not as big of a deal. But I think if you're talking about affecting the crowd, that's a crowd that's probably not unlike a lot of Nebraska fans, where you're kind of nervous in these big games. Your team hasn't really been in these spots a ton or come through in these spots a ton. So, what happens if Nebraska wins the toss? Do they take the ball and try to go down the field and score, or do they kind of do what they've often done under Matt Rule, which is defer and check out the elements and get it in the second half and play kind of those middle 8 minutes and manage it that way? So I think just a lot of really interesting sort of different circumstances than we've seen, and it's going to be a really interesting litmus test for how ready Nebraska is.
It's Evan Bland with us here from the Omaha World Herald, his usual Wednesday segment with us here on Hail Varsity Radio. And Evan, whenever you look at this game, is this a game that you think Nebraska can change the narrative around the program about themselves? Because Nebraska, you kind of had an opportunity with Colorado, but when you get the win, everyone says, well, it's Colorado, they're a dumpster fire. Is this a game against an undefeated opponent, a top 20 team in Indiana, where Nebraska can change that narrative that's grown over the past 10 years of, well, Nebraska's going to find a way to lose? Is this a game where you can change that narrative, or is Indiana still not a team that you think has that national level of respect just yet?
It's a game where right now, in the moment, they could change it. But Rutgers kind of was that way a couple weeks ago and suddenly seems a little less so with the injuries they've had and the loss to Wisconsin. So, Nebraska could go into Bloomington and win the game, and maybe Indiana loses a few games in the second half and some of that luster comes off. I just think one thing I'm going to be writing about here later this week is, a win really allows you to remove those two big monkeys that have been on the program's back for a long time. You'd get to a bowl, qualify with that 6th win, and you'd be the top 25 team. I mean, you got to go back 8 years for either one of those things. And, I mean, look around the country. Every week there are top 25 upsets, and you've got fan bases that are excited and memories that are made. And it just feels like for a long time, Nebraska's been on the sideline in that regard. You know, you're looking at some of these other games around the country, and you're just like, man, when's the fun? When's the party going to be around Husker Nation? And so, like, I think this game could be a start of that. You know, you knock those monkeys off your back, you get to bowl eligibility, and you build from there. I mean, you win this game, and suddenly that Ohio State game feels even bigger next week. You win this game, and that confidence goes back up. Maybe depending on how it were to happen, you know, maybe special teams is shored up and inspires something other than dread when they go out there. Like, there's just, I think it's an opportunity to build on it. Is it a program definer? I don't know. I mean, we'll see how Indiana shakes out and what the rest of the season brings. But I do think it's a unique chance because of all the things we've talked about that they haven't had yet this year.
In this moment, it's the next one, but it's a big one, and it is another swing at the plate, Evan, for Nebraska. How do you envision this game going? Stylistically, what needs to happen for Nebraska on both sides of the football? And of course, special teams needs to be buttoned up.
Yeah, I mean, it kind of feels like a 1st to 30 sort of game for me. I don't think if you're Nebraska, you want to get into anything beyond that. I don't think this is a 14-7 kind of game either. I think it's somewhere in that middle ground. And if you're Nebraska, I mean, I think you probably want to start by doing what you've done, which is control the clock, run the ball. Maybe you're not super effective at it in terms of explosive plays. Maybe you are. But if you're not, at least you're keeping the ball away from Indiana's offense and keeping that crowd somewhat in check. You know, I'll be curious to see how Raiola bounces back from that Rutgers game. I think the elements are going to be a lot more favorable to throw the ball. And then you kind of look, Indiana likes that zone-style defense, and that's really been the area that Raiola has done exceptionally well in as a freshman, finding those pockets and hitting receivers in those open spaces. So I think if Nebraska had to get into a more of a back-and-forth game with Indiana, I think it could. That's probably not its preferred path to victory. And then on the other side, to me, one of the X factors of the game is going to be Nebraska's defensive line. I mean, you look at what Indiana's faced. Probably the best defenses it's faced so far have been Northwestern and UCLA, maybe. And I don't think their front four, front seven matches up with what Nebraska is going to show them. So, it looks good when your quarterback's completing 70% of his passes. And when you have all these playmakers, it becomes harder when your quarterback's under pressure in a lot of those different ways. So I think this could be a good game for the Black Shirts. I don't know that, I think that they can hold their own. I don't know that you want to put too much on them in terms of picking up the slack for the offense or the special teams, but I think they can be an asset as well. So to me, it's kind of one of those 28-24, 30-27 kind of games. And maybe it comes down to a big play here or a turnover there.
It's Evan Bland with us. And Evan, Nebraska didn't get the best showing from Dylan Raiola against Rutgers. What does he need in a bounce back opportunity against Indiana to give his team the best chance to win?
Well, I'll be curious how he comes out of the bye week. You think about his experience to this point. He's a 19-year-old true freshman navigating his first college football season, and he just went 6 games consecutively. A little bit banged up physically, but I think more so the break was probably good for him mentally. And he said as much Tuesday that he was able to be away for a couple of days last weekend, see some family. It affords you some time to look a little deeper maybe into what the offense is doing and to self-scout a little bit more. So, you talk. There's been a lot of praise for Raiola's play, and deservedly so. I think this is another maybe chance to see how that plays out where, again, the ones who are most successful, the coaches, the players, thrive when you give them extra opportunity to prepare and to recover and be ready to go. And so we'll see what that's like for him. I mean, everyone continues to say what a grinder he is. He's coming in at 5 a.m. and waking up Matt Rule, who's asleep on his office floor. You know, that's the kind of grinder that we're talking about. So I would expect him to bounce back well. Again, I think the elements, being friendly, you can't understate what that could mean for him too, and just the style that Indiana plays defensively, I think will lend itself well to what Raiola wants to do. So I would expect this to be one of his better offensive games as long as he has that protection up front.
Evan Bland from the Omaha World Herald with us. Evan, I wanted to ask you this real quick. Nebraska's already faced a road test at Purdue in the state of Indiana. I wanted to ask you, with the conditions, like you said, being favorable and with Dylan Raiola not having to throw into the wind, what does an ideal first quarter game plan look like for Nebraska? How balanced should they be in that first quarter to get the freshmen settled down off a bye week?
I think, first of all, again, it comes down to, like, if you win the toss, what do you do? If it were me, I think you take the ball and you try to get the crowd out of it a little bit. So, what does Nebraska do there? But I think it's just kind of doing what they have done, which is find a balance between run and pass. And again, people have talked about the frustrations with the explosiveness of the running game, but I think Nebraska has shown a commitment to continue to run the ball, again, if for no other reason than to eat up some clock and to protect their defense. So I think you come down and you do that. Marcus Satterfield, the offensive coordinator, said that third down conversions have been a major point of emphasis here during the off week. So how do you get into third and manageable, 3rd and 2 type of situations? And then the other kind of telling point to me is going to be, what do you do if you're into, Indiana territory, say around the 30 or the 25, and you're on 4th and short? Like, are you going to put your field goal unit out there and trust that operation, or are you going to go for it at that point? So just a lot of really intriguing pieces to me. I don't think Nebraska needs to change a lot of what it does. It just needs to tighten it up a little bit against the defense in Indiana that's going to be pretty aggressive, and sometimes that leaves it open for exploitation.
It's Evan Bland, Omaha World Herald, at Evan Bland OWH. Evan, enjoy the ballpark today and enjoy Bloomington this weekend. We'll get caught up again.
Sounds good, guys. Thanks.
Good stuff from Evan Bland. We'll spend some time with former Hoosier head coach, and you see him on BTN, Gerry DiNardo. Get his take on Nebraska-Indiana here next segment. So the NCAA can move quickly when they want to. The NCAA is issuing an interpretation here to restore time if there is a 12-man penalty. They closed the loophole, the old Lanning loophole, as Oregon had some time to shave off at the end of the ball game against Ohio State. A release today by the NC2A issued a new rules interpretation on how to handle a penalty for 12 players on the field in the final 2 minutes of either half. The defense has 12 players actively participating in that down. The offense can choose, along with the 5-yard penalty, to have game clock time put back on, and that will make what happened last Saturday once in a lifetime wow for Lanning. No time change would be made if there was 12 players, but one of them was attempting to leave the field and did not affect the play.
You know what I hate about this? Someone in the comments said this yesterday. No, I did some research on this. You're punishing the defense for the offense not knowing the rules. With 12 men on the field there, Ryan Day could have taken a timeout or taken a delay of game, wouldn't have lost a timeout, wouldn't have been charged with the delay of game, wouldn't have marched off 5 yards because of what the defense was doing substitution-wise. They would have been penalized and no time would have run off the clock. So, you're punishing the defense for the offense not knowing the rules, but whatever.
Ohio State's got to be better in tight ball games. Stop me if you've heard that before. Their record against top fives isn't great. Coach DiNardo up next on Hail Varsity.
And now, back to Hail Varsity Radio.
Back with you, it's Hail Varsity. Chris Schmidt, Elijah Herbel, Justice Rhody, and we welcome in Big Ten Network analyst, the coach, Gerry DiNardo, back with us. And, Coach, great weekend of some college football and a spot you know well, Bloomington. A lot of eyes on Nebraska, Indiana. How are you doing?
I'm doing great. I think we're having a great year. We've just passed mid-season. Hate that it's going so fast, but it's going to start getting even more excited than it's been.
Absolutely. I mean, you got helmet games every weekend, monster matchups, and each week feels like an elimination for some and a chance for others. And I want to get your take on just the vibe you anticipate in Bloomington. You've been there, you've coached there, you've been a part of big games. What do you anticipate Saturday, crowd, juice with this matchup?
Well, as everybody knows, Indiana's one of the biggest stories in college football. So, obviously there'll be a lot of Indiana fans there. The one thing that will be hard to tell is, as you know, Nebraska fans really travel, so are we going to be able to separate the Reds? I don't know if they're different shades or not, but certainly more Indiana fans will be there than they have in past years and maybe past games. But again, even before the season, I'd anticipated a full stadium because of the way Nebraska travels.
Well, I mean, here's the thing. Nebraska wears scarlet and cream. Indiana wears crimson and cream. I think the average person will be able to tell those apart. Scarlet and crimson, wildly different.
Okay. However you want to do it. But I've coached in a couple places where we had to wait for someone that wore the same color as we would so we could take our aerial picture of the stadium. Because the people we were recruiting didn't necessarily know that they weren't our fans. So that's when you got a tough job when you have to use the visiting fans that are the same color to get your aerial shot.
Let's get into the toughness of the job. Reaction to what Coach Cignetti's done. I mean, phenomenal career, and he goes from James Madison to Bloomington in the portal era. What's your read on just this? Not only the start, but how real is Indiana? That's the question a lot of us have.
Yeah, well, first of all, the model is different, right? Now, I mean, it wasn't too long ago. It was during COVID that Tom Allen had a heck of a season, and I predicted Tom Allen would break the coaching record of the most wins at Indiana, which is 69. And Bill Mallory. But I think the story starts back, Chris, when Scott Dolson, the AD, hired Cignetti. He's an older guy. I believe he's 60 or 61. He's coached at some smaller schools, and he's always been very successful. So that started it. Then you include him bringing a bunch of players from a very successful lower-level program that are playing very well and are very good players. So, I mean, the whole thing is a very interesting take. It'll be interesting as we go forward. Other schools like Indiana, if they're in the same situation, will look for the answers the same way that Scott Dolson did. So to me, that's where it starts. But then, the storyline really is what they look like on film, on video. I mean, they are really well coached, and they're getting everything they can out of every player that steps onto the field. And so you talk about a blue-collar matchup. I think this is one between Indiana and Nebraska. And I'm not sure that's always been the case on the Indiana sideline. And so these two teams, aside from their history, these two teams have a lot in common.
Whenever you look at the way that each coach has kind of turned their respective program around, it's Matt Rule with a level of confidence, but also a level of toughness in how he's approached the job. Cignetti's come in, I think, with that same kind of blue-collar work ethic, but he's also had a bravado about him. I don't get your thoughts. What do you think that bravado has brought the Indiana football program? I mean, it's traditionally a basketball school, but he stepped in and said, you know what, as long as I'm here, it's not going to be a basketball school, and I'm putting words into his mouth, but that's kind of the mentality that it seems like he's had.
Well, the bravado worked because they're 6-0. Had they not been 6-0, then everybody would have said, who would say that at a basketball game, and who would say that? Google me. All the stuff that he has done, it's worked. So if they weren't winning, it may have been a punchline. But now that they're winning, I think what it's given the team is the team has more confidence because they have this coach that said some far-out things, but he's backed them up. Hey, let's remember, I mean, Indiana's eligible for a bowl, and Nebraska isn't. I mean, who predicted that? Now, Nebraska will be eligible because they're going to win another game. I don't know what game it is, but I mean, this whole scenario, you got Big Noon there. I mean, it's just, again, it's a great story. Is it sustainable? Well, it's sustainable based on recruiting. If they recruit good players and they keep coaching, I really believe it's a really good staff. I think both staffs are really excellent. So to me, now it's recruiting. This is a matchup game, in my opinion, meaning that the talent is fairly equal. It's a matchup game, and the result of matchup games, in my mind, come down to coaching and usually quarterback play.
Let's get into the quarterbacks. Dylan Raiola trying to bounce back from tough weather, tough defense against Rutgers. He's had a bye week. Rourke has been insane. Guy is just incredible, along with the weapons and the balance that Indiana has. What's the film told you, Coach DiNardo, about both quarterbacks so far?
Well, obviously, Rourke looks like a veteran. I think Mike Shanahan does a great job play calling, and that helps them. Both offensive lines, I think, are very similar in talent. Raiola seems to be getting more confidence as he plays more. He's a little bit more of a freelancer than Rourke is. So I'd say that's a push based on the supporting cast. I don't know that either quarterback has an edge going into the game, but I do believe if there's a big difference in the quarterback play, whoever plays, or they could neutralize each other. But going in, I see Rourke a little bit, more seasoned than Raiola.
It's Gerry DiNardo with us here on Hail Varsity Radio, talking Nebraska-Indiana, the matchup, big noon kickoff on Saturday. And Coach, whenever you look at Nebraska's defense, that's going to be huge on Saturday. Be able to slow down that high-powered Indiana offense. It's been a tale of two defenses at times this year. Northern Illinois and Illinois, they looked like a far cry from what we thought they could be coming into the year, and then they kind of turned things around against both Purdue and against Rutgers, and they were playing more up to that standard that Coach White talks about. What do you think Nebraska needs from their defense if they want to stay in this football game? What do you think they need to do to slow down the Indiana offense?
Yeah, now I'm going to talk about this Saturday. Tony White's defense is he's an outstanding play caller as well. But the problems that the scheme creates, the three down linemen head up the center and the two tackles. No offensive line or offensive line coach wants to block a three-man front where nobody is shaded. If I'm an offensive lineman, if I'm the offensive left guard and the three technique is lined up outside my left shoulder, I know what gap he most likely has. I mean, they'll move him sometimes. But when these three guys line up, head up the center, head up the two tackles, that's the most difficult thing. And then to further complicate Indiana's offensive line is when they get into the bear, when they take the three down line and they cover the center and they're on the outside shoulder of both guards. Interesting enough, they've both had a week off. I think the week off favors Indiana's preparation because of Tony White's unique defense. That everyone would love to have 2 weeks for this unique defense. So whether that's a major issue in the game, I don't know. But I know if I was going against Tony White, I sure would take the 2 weeks.
Coach DiNardo's with us, Big Ten Network, Nebraska-Indiana this weekend, Hail Varsity Radio. Coach, defensively with Tony White, I'm asking you, how do you slow down or try and neutralize what Indiana's done with the RPO? I know it's going to be so key for Nebraska's linebackers, but tell me here, what do you tell your linebackers to do against what Indiana's done with a really sound run game and wideouts that are great after the catch? That RPO can really be a difference maker.
Yeah, so the RPO is the modern day wishbone, right? Instead of pitching it to the halfback, you're throwing it to a receiver. So anytime you're playing option football, you have to make a decision which of the three phases are the most potent and the one we have to stop, and then we have to adjust to the other two. So I think that's what every defensive coach has to figure out versus RPO. Do we want to take away the quarterback run? Do we want to take away the give? Or do we want to take away the forward pass, which used to be the pitch in any other offense? So, it's the modern day option. You got the same problems you did when Texas was running the wishbone in the 70s. Dive quarterback pitch. Who are you going to prioritize, and how are and what other two are you going to react to? And usually the defense, especially the well-trained defenses, you'll notice they'll get better during the game, defending the option. because it's so hard to simulate that if you're not the same type of offense. And again, they both have 2 weeks, and so that plays to the defense's advantages probably on both sides. But again, if I'm the offensive line of Indiana, I'm very happy to have 2 weeks to prepare for someone lined up, head up the center, and the 2 tackles.
Coach, before we get you out of here, probably about 90 seconds left here. Just want to give you an open-ended question, 2 parts to it. Indiana wins this game if, Nebraska wins this game if. What do you think some keys to this game are?
Well, I think the keys are probably the same as they always are. Who turns the ball over, who controls the line of scrimmage. But ultimately, big picture, I think this comes down to coaching decisions, and quarterback play. And I think those are probably the most important people in this game. Now, if you have a bunch of turnovers and all that, maybe it doesn't matter what the coaches do or say, and maybe it doesn't matter which quarterback plays better. But matchup opponents, give me the best quarterback and give me the coach that makes the best decisions.
Coach, do you think Indiana's offense can put up a lot of points on the Nebraska defense? That's been Nebraska's strength, is their D.
I don't think so. Again, I mean, I've talked so much about Tony White's defense that I'm talking about it because I think it's a major issue of this game, and I think the 2 weeks preparation by Indiana is a major issue in this game. And so, yeah, I don't see Indiana scoring a bunch of points. But, we've all underestimated Cignetti up to this point, so maybe it's just a continuation of us all making mistakes.
All right, if all of Husker Nation's invading Bloomington, Coach, where do they go for a good old time?
Well, if they want to go to an Italian restaurant I used to own, it's D'Angelo's, and it's right in town. It's casual dining, it's calzones, it's pizzas, it's pasta. And the new owner is Mark Miller, and he's done a great job with it. I'm very happy for him.
All right, so we got that out of the way. That's big. That is big, and it sounds good. Coach, post some more of the Coach DiNardo's kitchen. I haven't seen any posted
in a couple
years.
Yeah.
Yeah, I know. I gotta get back to it. I do. After the season.
All right.
Remind me after the season, I'll get back to it.
All right.
We miss it.
Coach DiNardo's with us. Coach, take care and appreciate you. Thanks for the time.
Thanks for having me, guys. Appreciate it.
And now, back to Hail Varsity Radio.
Back into it, it's Hail Varsity, and it's a Jock Doc Wednesday. Dr. Brandon Seifert with this Nebraska Orthopedic Center. Dr. Brandon, Detroit's one of those teams folks are fired up about. Their standout defensive end, Aidan Hutchinson, though, gruesome injury, a broken tibia and fibula. I'm pretty sure you saw this, and man, it was pretty graphic.
Yeah, it was. Those are always terrible injuries to see. You talked about kind of what that was with tibia and fibula. Essentially, if you think about anatomically, the tibia is basically shin bone. The fibula is a little small bone to the outside. And obviously, anytime you have that kind of gruesome kind of look to that part of the leg, something's got to give, and it typically is going to be the tibia. Fortunately, pretty rare injury in football, but when you do see these, they're unfortunately pretty memorable when they do happen, and you can obviously name a couple of those along the way that we've unfortunately witnessed on TV over the last several years.
Dr. Brandon, and when we talk about the tibia and fibula break, how dangerous is that, not only for an athlete, but just for a human with long-term damage and just the danger to the leg?
Yeah, that's a great question. So there's a lot of things that go along with having a tibia fracture. So we classify that as a long bone, one of the long bones in your body, which has kind of special indications because of it. So things you worry about with tibia fractures, obviously a bone that size, potentially going to have some sharp edges as it breaks. There's not a lot of skin covering that area. So this is an area that unfortunately can be quite common to have an open fracture where basically the bone can protrude through the skin, which then creates other issues such as infection and wound healing issues. That's a big problem to try to fix if that occurs. The other thing that can happen here is, again, not in the area, a long bone, you can kind of lever on other structures in the area, whether it be muscle or potentially even an injury to like a neurovascular structure like an artery or potentially a nerve injury. Those are big ones kind of right off the bat you worry about. And then, later on with these, sometimes you worry about once they get into the hospital, have gone through a operative or fixation procedure for this. There's a thing called fat emboly syndrome, where when the bone breaks, all those contents that are inside of that bone, marrow tissue, which contains a lot of fatty tissue, things that are not normally in the bloodstream, now you get this big rush of that material into the bloodstream, and that can create all kinds of what we call vital sign changes, drops in blood pressure, changes in mental status, and if not treated well, it can become life-threatening. So that's obviously something that can pop up. And then, of course, there's the whole aspect of how easy is it to recover from one of these and get back to like a high level of athletics. And that'll be the real challenge, for him trying to get back.
Dr. Brandon Seifert with us here at Jock Doc Wednesday, talking Aidan Hutchinson, the lower leg fracture he suffered against the Cowboys on Sunday. And Dr. Brandon, as a UFC fan, you've seen some injuries like this before, particularly with those leg kicks where the leg wraps around. It's really gruesome. But a lot of times, and I can think a couple off the top of my head, those guys are able to come back and return once they overcome the mental hurdle. So as we discuss this recovery process, is there anything unique about a fracture in this part of the body that needs to be accounted for when compared to, say, a fracture in the arm or elsewhere in the body? Or is this going to be a recovery process that's similar to other fractures?
Yeah, no, it's a longer recovery process. There really is a lot of kind of soft tissue damage that occurs when this happens. So muscles in the area can have a significant damage. Then there's also just the trauma of the surgery aspect of it that can create some longer-term issues in terms of some scarring and maybe some potential for nerve damage. And then the other issues that you worry about is when that bone heals back together. If it does heal back together, there are some times when these do heal slowly. In particular, if somebody has like an open fracture, delayed, it may not heal. You might have to do other procedures to get that to heal. So those are some other factors that can come into play here. But it really is a difficult injury to turn back to. I think more on the martial arts side, it's probably an easier injury to overcome when you're looking at like a football type injury where you're doing a lot of running, foot cutting movements. A lot of the things that you have to do, like for example in this gentleman's position, it's hard to get back to those because it does change kind of your function. And in the big scheme of things, it takes such a long time to recover from these that sometimes you miss your window of getting back into your previous, say, starting spot or spot on the team.
To Jock Doc Wednesday, Nebraska Orthopedic Center, Dr. Brandon Seifert with his Aidan Hutchinson. 7.5 sacks already, lit up Tampa earlier this year with 4.5 of those 7.5 sacks. And you hit on it, Dr. Brandon, with just the position. Aidan's going, 280, 3 bills, 6'5", a monster with that size and speed component, and a guy that plays with his hand in the dirt. And I just think of how much power and force he has got to have, right, in the lower body to stop the run and get after the quarterback. And this has got to be one of the worst positions to have this break at when I think of just what he needs to function on third down, let alone, 70 plays a game.
Yeah, Chris, that's a great point. It really is. It's different if you're maybe more of like the drop back passer type. You probably could get by with having this kind of injury and getting back maybe a little bit easier. But in his position, you really do rely upon that lower extremity strength, that lower extremity coordination, that ability to dig your foot into the turf, push off while you have somebody kind of leaning on you. It's going to take a lot of work and effort to get back to that, and to feel comfortable doing it, and to feel like you have the flexibility there, and then just being able to regenerate that kind of ability for those muscles to fire appropriately and regain the strength and coordination that he once had.
It's Dr. Brandon Seifert with us here, Jock Doc Wednesday. And Dr. Brandon, we've seen in recent days the Lions have been exploring some other players that they can use to fill Hutchinson's position. Doesn't sound like he's going to be coming back this season. Along those same lines, what do you think this timetable for recovery is going to look like for Hutchinson? When do you think we might see him back on a football field?
I think it'll be a good year. Yeah, I think he has a full year of recovery. Does he make it back for the start of the season next year? I think it'll be close. I think there's a good potential for that. I think that the biggest kind of hurdle for him will be, honestly, just simply getting it to heal well. You get that. If you have the tibia heal well without any delayed healing, that allows him to get back to the weight room and working out sooner. That'll really be kind of a telltale sign. And usually by 6 or 8 weeks, you're going to have a really good idea if that's going to heal well. I don't think they made any comments about this being an open fracture. I don't think that it was. But obviously, if it was, even if it was a subtle open fracture, like a little tiny poke hole, that does change the game a little bit just in terms of that increased risk of not healing.
Dr. Brandon, last thought. Is there any sort of treatment here, about 30 seconds, post-surgery, PRP, that type of aid with recovery?
Yeah, that's a pretty experimental area in terms of bone healing. We don't see a lot of the necessarily fracture care on the sports medicine side. And I haven't read a lot of data in terms of the orthopedic trauma folks using a lot of PRP with these injuries. It's always a potential. Again, the big issue there is just being careful about introducing things that potentially could cause infection. So I'm not sure how aggressive they'll be with the PRP stuff just in this scenario, but it's an interesting question. And I think over the next couple of years, we should be able to tease out, what is the utility of using PRP with fractures. I'm sure there's already a bunch of ongoing studies with it. I haven't seen any as of late.
Dr. Brandon, enjoy your weekend. Thanks for a few minutes today.
Okay, fellas, take care.
And now, back to Hail Varsity Radio.
One final time, big thanks to Dr. Brandon from Nebraska Orthopedic. Appreciate Coach DiNardo taking time. A lot of chatter on BTN about Nebraska-Indiana. Evan Bland and Mr. Mike Babcock, Mr. Husker Football, with us tomorrow on the show. Dr. Brandon Vogel. We'll call him Dr. Brandon Vogel. Vogues with Connor Reed going to be with us. Damon Benning, Gary Barnett, coach has seen Indiana. Get his take on Nebraska and Indiana, that matchup. Then Danny Burke going to join us, Burke's Best Bets. So we need to put our heads together. We've had several suggestions in the stream. And Loose Lips, appreciate the Carter Nelson question. We'll dive into that a little bit tomorrow. Any questions or comments or suggestions, jump in the stream. Hail Varsity YouTube, like and subscribe there to watch the show or communicate with us. But so we know what to order Justice up for his 21st birthday tomorrow. Elijah, you are looking for a side hustle in the wintertime.
Yeah, I am. So simply put, going to Columbus, going to USC, going to Iowa. What am I going to do while I'm there? Probably spend too much money. I have my side hustle in the spring and summer, umpiring baseball. Fall's a busy time, tough for me to pick up a side hustle. The months of December through March, there's college basketball on. Other than that, I'm usually cooped up in my house. I'm trying to find something to do during those months.
An usher at PBA or at CHI? Is that paid or is that volunteer?
It's got to be paid, right?
I don't know.
Maybe.
I don't know.
I could be a bouncer at a bar, maybe. I think I'm too kind-hearted.
What kind of bar are you wanting to work at? You don't want to be a bouncer at a bar where you actually have to bounce.
Yeah, that's the problem. So you want to stay away from the college bars. But once you get to the blue-collar bars, I'm not that mean and scary, let's be honest.
No, but if you have a nail gun,
Just sitting at the front door.
Yeah.
Nail gun in hand.
Drill. Power tools.
Wearing a shirt that says, "Guns don't kill people, I kill people." It's possible. I don't know.
That's the homework tonight. What should Elijah do for his winter side hustle? In the stream and in the email, we want to hear from you.
There's an idea.
Becky says, get Justice an Uber at the end of the night.
See, a couple weeks ago, I did drive a whole bunch of people home after that. Was that the Colorado game? I think it was. So I didn't make any money off of that. Maybe I should. The other thought was I could do Justice's homework for one flat rate.
Well, my homework's not that hard. You could pick up...
That was the point. I was hoping for that.
No, listen, you could pick up door dashing.
That's not awful, actually. That puts a lot of miles in the car.
Listen.
You are both banned from visiting the Schmidt house with Junior's midnight phone calls.
Well, Junior's the best with side hustles, so maybe I should talk to him.
Yeah.
Thursday, Friday, Saturday nights, you make the most money, I'm telling you. Because that's when everybody gets a little bit too many adult beverages in their system and they get a little hungry. And then you make great money because they're feeling free with the tips.
I could Uber drive. I do like driving.
There are Loose Lips is suggesting other side hustles. This is Elijah. And Elijah is here to meet your wife.
No. I will pass on that.
Poor Elijah.
Sounds like a great way to get assaulted in public.
Just getting rented out. Poor Elijah. What are you doing now, Elijah? Saving up for a new bed.
Passing on that.
There we have. Back tomorrow, 4 o'clock with you. It's Hail Varsity. Thanks for tuning in.